Alright, so this video is going to be pretty short and sweet and not super detailed or anything. I don't really know what's going on with the lighting. Like, I know it's because I've got windows here, but it looked better in other videos, and I recorded decently around the same time of day, but I don't know. We'll just do this and we'll see what happens. But I'll probably do, like, you know, the trailers or whatever for Tears of the Kingdom and so on. But yeah, so Tears of the Kingdom, I wanted to talk about it briefly. I don't have a whole lot to say about this game, and that's basically the whole point of the video, is that there's just not a whole lot, I think, to say. At least for me. Like, here's the deal. If you liked Breath of the Wild, then you will love Tears of the Kingdom. If you didn't care for Breath of the Wild, then you're probably also not going to care for Tears of the Kingdom. Not to say that they're identical games in any, sense or fashion, but you can very much tell that the second game is a true sequel to the first, in the sense of so much is the same. Like, physics, the environments, which they did spruce up and change. The gameplay battle mechanics are all the same, as far as, like, moving around and swords and damage and weapons and stuff. Now, they made very creative, innovative processes to the environment, to the battle system, to give it a fresh breath of air. But at the end of the day, it still is very similar. Like, yeah, if you didn't like it before, you're not going to like it now. So, yeah, I mean, like, that's kind of about it. Like, it's just as good, arguably even better than the first game, depending on, like, what you're talking about. Like, the music is phenomenal. The story is, I think, better than the first. It's definitely more story-driven than the first game is. There's a lot more moving pieces, and there's a more, like, there's, like, story plot A, and then that leads to story plot B, and then so on. There's more going on plot-wise and story-wise, and there's more to put together, which is really cool. One thing that I kind of was a fan of was the boss fights. I liked them a lot more in this game than I did in Breath of the Wild, and, like, that was a critique from the first game, is like, oh, the boss fights are just different versions of Ganondorf, or Ganon, technically, I guess. So they made, like, actual monsters for the bosses here. And then they not only brought back traditional bosses, but they also brought back traditional dungeons, which I didn't think they would do with the whole Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom environment system. It just doesn't seem to suit itself naturally to that kind of thing. Like, and even then, practically speaking, the dungeons in Tears of the Kingdom function the same way as the Divine Beasts do in the first game. Like, it's just, instead of an actual dungeon, it's just a machine that's been turned into a dungeon. But practically, it's a dungeon. So, it's like, like, it's the same thing. What is kind of cool is that, at least from what I can tell in Tears of the Kingdom, they're revisitable. Maybe I'm tripping on that. Maybe that's not right. But I'm pretty sure they are. Because I think they are. But maybe they're not. Gameplay-wise, being able to fuse weapons and build a bunch of stuff is so cool. I mean, like, even, it basically turns Breath of the Wild into a sandbox, which is insane to think about. But yeah, you can do basically any and every single thing that you could ever imagine. You can make hover bikes, you can make tanks, you can not do any of that. You can make a little cooking pot to put a Korok in. Like, there's so much. There's so much to do, and the developers really thought about each and every single interaction of one item to the other as far as gameplay is concerned. But yeah, I mean, like, it's phenomenal. But I can only say that so many times until it just kind of is like, okay, and, like, that's about it. Like, I played it, I beat it, I liked it. That's kind of about it. I don't have a whole lot else to say, I guess, aside from the story, which I really, really enjoyed. I think it's an improvement from the first. I do think lore-wise, it's a little odd. Like, I haven't played all of the Zelda games. I've played, like, 4, which, in the grand scheme of things, is not very many. But I do keep track of the lore, and, or at least I try to, and the whole timeline deal and everything. So the way that I understood it was that Breath of the Wild kind of seemed to be a convergent timeline from the 3 previous timelines. The Child timeline, the Fallen Hero timeline, and then whatever the third one was. Yeah. So Breath of the Wild kind of seemed to be a convergent timeline in the sense of the events that made the timeline split is now being not that core event, but the consequences and result of that event are being undone, and the timelines are coming back together. And in Breath of the Wild, that was kind of evident by the fact that there were so many Easter eggs to references from games that were only in specific timelines. So it wouldn't make sense for them to be there, kind of deal. Like species of different characters and creatures, different item materials, different areas, and so on. Some areas had like names of characters that only existed in specific timelines, and it's like, oh, that I guess that could be just a coincidence, but really, like Tingle Island, you're gonna tell me that that's a coincidence, kind of deal. So, yeah. What was I talking about? I think lore. Oh yeah, timeline. Yeah. So, Tears of the Kingdom is a sequel to Breath of the Wild, probably anywhere between like 2 to 8 years, give or take, with like a couple of hints and stuff that the game throws at you. It takes place about 2 to 8 years after the events of Breath of the Wild, which I thought was pretty cool. But it gives you flashbacks of the first king of Hyrule, what also seems to be the first incarnation of Link, Zelda, and or no, actually, not even Link and Zelda, just the first incarnation of Ganondorf, because Zelda and Link didn't exist in the timeline that Zelda went back to. It was just King Rauru and Sonia, his wife, I think was her name. Yeah, so I was a little confused because he never dies, that Ganondorf. He never dies. He just gets imprisoned and trapped for the entirety of time. Like, from the very beginning, from the first incarnation of Ganondorf to the very end. Because this is all after... This is immediately after Skyward Sword. It's kind of like, if you're trying to follow the timeline, is what it would be. Because it's the first king of Hyrule, right? So, unless I'm just getting that wrong, this would need to be the first incarnation of Ganondorf. In which case, he's trapped, and he's still conscious. He's still alive, right? So he's trapped, but then you see him in other games, like Ocarina of Time and so on, and it's just like, how are you here? Because your previous self never died, and you didn't escape, so how are you another incarnation of Demise? That was kind of my thought, is like, I don't really know how this works. And even if it's not before Skyward Sword, or after Skyward Sword, even if it's before, say, like Ocarina of Time or Majora's Mask or something, say it's after. Well, what do you do with, like, the Toon games? Like, Wind Waker. He's supposed to be in Wind Waker, so is he back? Like, how do you explain the incarnations is kind of where I'm like, huh, odd. And I also thought, too, that Calamity Ganon is, like, him giving up on reincarnation. He's just done. So if he was done with it, and he was willing to put all of his anger and hatred, everything that is the cause of the reincarnations, because that's what Demise does with the curse, is he's like, my hatred will, take form and continuously haunt you till the end of time. If Calamity Ganon was that, and it was the amalgamation of all of Ganon or Demise's hate, then how come all of any other pre-existing incarnations that could have ever existed, how come they just didn't die, right? Like, why were they separate entities? Why was Calamity Ganon separate from the Ganondorf you fight in Tears of the Kingdom? What I recall hearing at one point was that Calamity Ganon was leaking out of the Ganondorf that's underneath Hyrule Castle that King Rauru entrapped. But then I'm still confused on the whole incarnation deal. Like, why this Ganondorf is still conscious and alive. So why do you have these other Ganondorfs that are rolling around? That just didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I'm sure, more. I don't know. Other fans have figured that out, but so that I was a little confused with. I thought the plot twist with Zelda being the dragon was so stinking cool. I loved that so much. Like, my jaw dropped. Was really good. Was really, really, really good. What else is there to talk about? I thought that the Ganon fight, the humanoid Ganon fight was pretty cool because he could also Flurry Rush. So you had to Flurry Rush a Flurry Rush and then hit him with Flurry Rush and in order to deal damage to him. That was just awesome. The dragon fight was kind of okay. Like, it's just, I'm gonna fly up and then land on you and then hit and then you're gonna knock me off and then I'm gonna fly up and then land and then hit and then you're gonna knock me off and then fly and then hit. So it's just like it's a little repetitive, but it's fine, I guess. Speaking of repetitive, I also kind of thought that the boss fights were that too. Like, they were fun and entertaining, but they weren't necessarily challenging. Especially the Goron one. Like, it was just, you just hit his legs a couple of times, and then you hit his eyeball the same way you would hit his legs. The Ice Dragon one was interesting, because that was my first boss fight, and I never collected the cold weather resistant items that I needed. So throughout that whole boss fight, I'm just eating, like, mushrooms or chill shrooms, whatever they're called, that barely give you any HP to try and survive the weather. And I did. I beat him without having any cold equipment resistances, and I just kept eating in the middle of battle, and I was able to kill him, which I thought was fun, but I also don't know if that's an oversight with kind of like an exploit of how you're able to do that. Like, I was definitely doing it harder than it was intended to be, but if I could just eat food the whole time, I don't know, like, that seems both like a double-edged sword in a good and a bad way, I think. The Goron boss fight was insane. The laser that would instant kill you, that I think was actually a little rough. Like, I was like, oh my god, I can't believe that's just killing me. And then the water boss fight was interesting because, like, I feel like it was a good mix of challenging and but also, like, easy to understand and what's going on, Because, like, the Ice Dragon fight for me was just tedious. The Goron fight was obnoxiously easy. The Gerudo fight was obnoxiously difficult. And the water one just seemed like a pretty good balance of, like, okay, this is annoying, but I see what I have to do. And it's not difficult to do that. So, that was good. I liked that. Yeah, like I said, there's not a whole lot to talk about. Like, the game's good. If you enjoyed the first one, you're gonna love this one. So yeah, that's also another reason why I never made, like, a big video on Breath of the Wild, was just because, like, I felt like I couldn't, like, I've said everything that's already been said, which is kind of what I'm doing here, but, I figured I got the time, why not talk about it, and since I played it. What else, I guess? I feel pretty confident in the fact that we'll probably get DLC. I don't know if it'll be like Breath of the Wild's DLC, where it's mostly gameplay enhancements and improvement, where it's like, here's 20 more shrines, and here's a boss battle that gives you a really cool item, and then here's, like, a little bit of lore exploration, and so on. I don't know. Part of me feels like that they don't want to just keep adding lore behind a paywall, but part of me also feels like that they want it to be a little more worthwhile than just a couple, like, oh, here's an extra challenge kind of deal, you know what I mean? So I don't really know what to expect for DLC for this game. It's bound to happen. Like, it's not gonna be announced probably until mid to late 2024, if I had to put money on it. Or maybe that's probably when it would release, like holiday season of 2024, and then get announced in, like, spring or summer. I could probably see that. But yeah, so DLC I think is definitely going to happen. As far as, like, where Zelda kind of goes from here, as much as the open world formula is great, it's just like, you know, you can also only play Breath of the Wild so many times until you're just like, okay, this is Breath of the Wild, but with X change, right? So again, and that's not a bad thing. Like, I'm wanting to be a little more realistic as far as like, if they keep making these kinds of games, it's just okay. Yeah, this is good. But it's also becoming safe, you know, like it's not innovative as much anymore, which I've said once, I've said 1,000 times, innovation is like my whole thing. Like, I don't care if it's bad, try it out if it's new and unique and funky, right? And then if it doesn't work out, then sure, then do something else. Go back to the way it was, or go back to something more mundane, or that's safer. Yeah, just, you know, at least say that you did something new. Yeah, so DLC, oh yeah, in future games, I kind of want a traditional, I either want a new Toon game to come out next, or a traditional 2D Zelda that's new, you know, not like a remake or anything. Do like a new 2D Zelda game. Maybe do a spin-off with, not like Hyrule Warriors spin-off, but like, you know, like a spin-off with another character. Like, give us a Ganon game, I guess. A Ganondorf game or a Zelda game or something. Just something different, you know? Like I said, innovation. Another thing was, I guess, the environments with the sky and the depths. Just being able to fly around in the sky is so cool. It's probably the best part. That's probably the part that I had the most fun with in the gameplay, is just flying around in the air. Excuse me. Flying around in the air, diving and freezing and climbing and all that. That's what I really enjoyed most probably about the gameplay, was the high-speed aerial gameplay and stuff. The depths were kind of cool too. My whole thing was just, I kind of realized that I didn't need anything that was down there. I guess there's like a really cool Master Koga fight that you can do that gives you an extra ability, but it's not necessary. I think it's auto build, I think is what it is, and it just like auto builds things that you've already made, which would be useful if I did that more often, but because I didn't, I never saw a reason to go do it, you know what I mean? I did some of the lore side quests and stuff. Those were all really cool. Getting the tier memories in the wrong order was a bit jarring, because I would be like, I would try and keep up with it, but then I was like, well, no, I just need to watch them all in order after I collect them. And even when I did, it kind of still felt like that I was missing a couple pieces. I mean, like, by the end of the game, I didn't necessarily feel that way, but as I was watching them, I was like, I wonder if there's, like, extra details here that I'm not necessarily getting or catching. Yeah, so, but, yeah, like I said, it was a great game. That's about it. So, yeah, I mean, like, a phenomenal game, like, easy 9 out of 10 kind of deal, but it's Zelda, so it's what you kind of expect at the moment, you know, in 2023, so, anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Although I may not have as many thoughts about it, I'd love to hear what you guys think, especially about, like, the whole Ganondorf incarnation thing. I'm a little lost about that, but, yeah, so anyway, guys, thanks for watching. This is Jake logging out. Peace.